Welcome back to the Padilla Family Homestead. We are going to be making a turkey pot pie for dinner tonight, and this is a loosey-goosey recipe. We are going to be using basically the vegetables that you have in the fridge or from the garden or whatever you have going on. You can pick up the exact same ingredients I'm using, that is fine, but I'm going to show you kind of how I make my pot pie. So there should already be a video out about how I make my pie crust. I will make sure I link to that below. So if you have not made a gluten-free pie crust yet, and you need a recipe for that, and you need to have that before we go on to the next step. So make sure you pause, go watch that video, and then come back, and then we'll put everything together here using that crust. So I have some carrots, some celery, some radish, some potato. I have some homemade turkey broth. We'll be using some arrowroot powder, lots of spices and seasonings and all the good stuff, and then the gluten-free pie crust. So that's kind of at this point what I have in my head. Oh, an onion and some garlic too. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to get the veggies out and start getting these cut up, and kind of talk you through the process on how I do this. Super simple and super easy. Okay, so I am going to start. I'm actually going to be making the pot pie on camera for you guys, but the exact same ingredients almost, for the most part, are needed for making some soup. We've had somebody in the house at the time of recording this that hasn't been feeling the greatest. And so some bone broth soup, having it on hand and having it, I'm just going to freeze it in single serve amounts in a freezer bag. And so anytime anybody wants some, they can take it out and enjoy that. So I am going to be chopping up double the stuff because I'm making soup and pot pie. So this onion is going to be enough for both of them. And I'm going to start working on this. Okay, so right now I have a pot on the stove for the turkey pot pie, and I have a pot on the stove for the turkey soup. And so I'm taking, each time I chop the ingredients, I'm going first to the pot pie, and then I am going and putting the rest of whatever I'm chopping into the soup. So I did about 1 carrot into the pot pie, and then I did 2 carrots into the soup because the soup pot is bigger. I usually use avocado oil instead of olive oil, but if you wanted to, you can use that, and you just want a little bit to stop it from burning. And so as I'm cutting all these things up, which obviously this is sped up for time's sake for the video, I think it's 7 times speed. All these previous things are going to be sauteing down. So put the onions in first, the carrot, the celery, then I'm going to do radish. Now you could, I've done this with broccoli, you could do corn, whatever vegetables that you have in your kitchen, turnips or rutabagas, whatever you want. Whatever you would kind of put into a soup, then I would go ahead and chop that up and saute it down to where it's pretty soft. You don't want it soggy, but you do want it somewhat soft. It's going to cook in the oven for about 45 minutes inside the pie dough, and so it's going to continue to cook a little bit. But it won't, if you put them in there raw, it's not going to cook all the way through correctly, and you'll still have crunchy vegetables. As you can see here, my husband wanted some tea, so he got his tea, and he is a happy camper now. I'm also showing you this with turkey.
You can absolutely do this with beef or pork roast or chicken, whatever meat that you want to use, or do it completely vegetarian if you wanted to. Obviously the pie crust is going to have butter in it, so it wouldn't be vegan, but you could make it vegetarian if you wanted to. Your imagination is the limit. Okay, so now I'm bringing you into the kitchen so you can kind of see what's going on. The silver pot is going to be for the pot pie. The black pot is going to be for the soup. And I start by adding my seasonings in here since all the vegetables have been sauteing for a little bit. And I do my seasoned salt, and then I'm going to add basil and black pepper. I also added in some smoked paprika. We're going to have some minced garlic that's dehydrated, and also some dehydrated bell pepper chunks that I wanted to add in. Each time I'm doing some into the pot pie, but I'm doing more into the soup. I'm also going to add in some dried parsley and some rosemary. Again, you could take these herbs wherever you want to. You could add thyme or oregano. You could spice it up a little bit differently. You can leave some of these out. It's whatever you want to do. I like adding them in here as everything's sauteing because I'm releasing some of those flavors and really getting the aromatics going into this, and it just, to me, toasting them with the sauteed vegetables increases the flavor immensely. So the next thing we're going to add is the homemade turkey bone broth. Now this is going to look a little congealed because it's homemade bone broth, so it has the collagen. So it goes in kind of clunky, but it's because it's been refrigerated. But as soon as it starts to heat up, then it loses the gel and it just goes into regular turkey broth. So if you've never made homemade bone broth, then, or you don't use bone broth, you may not be aware of that. So when it comes out, it kind of looks but it does taste delicious, creates delicious soup, and it is super healthy for you. So making bone broth is something I highly, highly suggest. So at this point, the vegetables have been sauteing for a little bit. The broth is in here warming up, and I almost forgot to get the turkey out, and I had it in the freezer. So I'm actually going to put in frozen turkey. I did decide instead of noodles for the turkey soup, I'm using cabbage. So I'll put that into the back one, and then I'll start adding the turkey and the arrowroot powder. So how I thicken up my pot pie filling is by using arrowroot powder. So this is hot. It's on the stove. It's hot. I'm adding in a teaspoon of arrowroot powder and kind of whisking it in with all the veggies, making sure it's really broken in. I decide, you know what, I want to add in another teaspoon. So total for this batch, I used 2 teaspoons. Now this is really going to depend on how much liquid you have, how big of a pot you're making, all of that kind of stuff. You want it to thicken though, because soup is going to be super runny. And if you put soup in a pie crust, as soon as you cut it, all your broth comes out of it. So some will still come out here, but not a lot because it's thickened up by that arrowroot powder, which is gluten-free, so it makes it amazing. So I have my turkey from the freezer, adding that in. It's already pre-cooked. It's just the dark meat and a little bit of white meat from when I cooked the turkey last. So I'm just separating it out in the bag and going to let it simmer down in the pot, and it loosens up very quickly for the pot pie. And then in the soup, it breaks down pretty fast, which I wasn't worried about how long the soup took to come together. The pot pie, though, you want to heat all this up, get it going, and then you want to let it cool a little bit. You really don't want to pour boiling hot broth into your pie dough. So you want to heat it up, get it to where it needs to. It'll still be warm when you pour it into your pie dough, but it shouldn't be boiling hot when you pour it into your pie dough crust.
Okay, so I just popped my pie crust out of the refrigerator. I am going to put this section back in the refrigerator while I work on this, because I want to keep it cold. It's a trick with pie dough. You want to keep it cold. You want it to melt when you put it in, when it's cooking in the oven, the butter. My hands are kind of warm from working with that turkey pot pie filling, so I want to be careful how much I handle it. Okay, so with gluten-free pie dough, I really like putting my dough between two pieces of parchment paper and then rolling it out this way. I am using a square pan because my pie pan's at my aunt's house, but this will work. So I'm going to layer it between the parchment, and I am going to start rolling.
Okay, so again, you really want to make sure it's between the parchment. You don't want a bunch of added flour in here because it is going to make it chalky if it gets too floury. And you're going to roll it out to whatever shape your pan is, to where it's far enough out. Now, I have an issue. I have a disc that kind of slips in my neck. Rolling pie dough crust is pretty difficult on my neck. And so I don't use the handles on my roller because I find that where my arms are positioned, I do better in the center of the rolling pin. So that's the only reason why I'm rolling like that. I feel like I get better even pressure and it doesn't hurt as bad. Now I just keep rotating this around so I'm evenly rolling it out. Everybody presses differently when they're rolling towards them versus rolling out. So you're going to get a more even roll when you have the rolling pin going the same direction. So I usually choose to roll out. And look at all that butter all the way through that crust. That looks delicious. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take my pan, and this is another great reason for using parchment paper, is you just flip that parchment over and line it up over your pan and then start to peel the parchment back. Now, I probably should have left my pie dough in the fridge just slightly longer than the 30 minutes. Plus, my hands were warm from dealing with the turkey pot pie. So I feel like it was sticking a little bit more. If it wasn't so late in the afternoon, I would have stuck this whole thing on the parchment back into the fridge for a little bit. Just to let it cool down, and it would have released better from the parchment. But it is what it is, and it turned out great. And so all I'm going to do now is I'm going to start pushing this into the pan, and I really kind of try to adjust the pie dough down and then push it against the edge, making sure there's not a bunch of air pockets in between the dough and the glass dish. This pan also doesn't have a lip the same way that a pie pan does. And so I need to make sure that when I'm trimming the edge of this pie crust off, which you'll see in a second, that I am not leaving it up on the lip, because that can cause butter to burn over as it cooks, to melt over the pie dish and into the bottom of the oven. So I'm pretty much just cleaning it off and creating the pie dough to be flush with the top of my baking dish, and then I will attach my top to that because my filling goes slightly lower than the actual container as well. If I have any spots that are broken in the pie crust, if I didn't roll it evenly, or as I put it into the square pan, something creased weird, I use my fingers, I push that in, I take some of the pie crust from the edge that's overlapping, and I press that in. Once you have your bottom pie crust done, then you're going to want to roll out your top pie crust. You want to make sure that that is rolled out and ready to go before you put your warm filling into your pie dough. Because remember, we want our butter to melt in the oven. We do not want it to melt sitting here. And so if we're going to put hot mixture into your hot pie filling into the pie crust, then it will melt it. So we really just want to make sure that everything's rolled out and ready to go. I just take the container and put it on top just to see if I have about the right width and size rolled out, that it's a similar thickness, and then take the cover off, and then we're going to dump the actual pie filling in. Okay, so we're going to get our hot mixture, and we are going to go ahead and, well, it's going to be a warm mixture, hopefully not piping hot, and we're going to pour that in right here. And once it's in, then we're going to go ahead and we're going to cover the top of it with the pie dough. And then again, just lining it up, trimming it down, fixing any holes that need to be fixed. Once we get everything lined up and cleaned up and the way we want it, then we will go ahead and do an egg wash. Now, this is going over warm fillings, so the top is going to be a lot harder to handle than the bottom of the crust was. So I find I need to fill in more pieces here and just kind of press things together, but also being very gentle, knowing that that butter is melting as you're actively working with it. So we take an egg and we beat it up, and then we're going to wash that over the top of this. Make sure you go the same direction with the egg, because if you start going back and forth on it, you're going to tear it like I did. So I just filled that in like you saw with another piece of dough. But you egg wash the whole thing, add some slits into it, whatever design you want, but you want steam to be able to escape. And then we're going to bake this at the 400 degrees. It's about 40 minutes, 45 minutes. It's really is going to depend on your oven and on how big your pie is and so forth. There's a lot of things. So start checking it around the 40-minute mark. It may take up to an hour. It just depends. And you will see what that looks like when I get it popped out of the oven. Look at that delicious pot pie. The bottom and the edges are all the golden color. It is sizzling and the crust is hard. Oh, this is going to be good. All right, so we're going to let this cool and we'll cut into it and serve it. But that is how easy it is to make a pot pie. It's pretty much making a soup, adding a little bit of a thickener, and putting it in crust. I hope you enjoy this recipe, and that if you haven't started making pot pies, or if you stopped because you couldn't have gluten or somebody in your family couldn't have gluten, that you are now able to enjoy it again. I mean, just, it's so golden all the way around. It smells delicious. So I'll show you this when we serve it up right at the end of this. But again, thank you for joining us. Stay tuned, because we will have another video using this pie crust coming out, making super cute little hand pies with pie filling inside that are delicious and fun and just easy for little hands to handle.
and great for just any event or just to have around. So we thank you. I hope you subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video.